Hey, third graders, welcome to our Monday. Our purpose today as readers is I can identify features of a realistic fiction. So, here are two texts that are realistic fiction that we will be reading this week. The one that we're going to read together today is called The Impossible Pet Show, and the other one that you will read on your own is Every Picture Tells a Story. So, let's talk about realistic fiction. What features make up a realistic fiction? Here is an anchor chart that you can refer to throughout your lesson today. Made up characters. That is a feature of a realistic fiction. A made up story that could really happen, but it never did happen. And then one of our other features that we're going to identify today is it has dialogue and illustrations. Those illustrations are showing the made-up characters and the made-up event. Dialogue is what shows the characters talking. So let's get started on our text today to identify these three features. Now remember, our purpose as readers is to identify those features of a realistic fiction. Our title is The Impossible Pet Show, and our essential question is, how can you use what you know to help others? Well, that essential question is already guiding us to a feature of a realistic fiction. A made-up event that could really happen, you could really use something you know to help others. Let's read on. My best friend Carla Hernandez called me on Thursday afternoon. Daniel, meet me in the park near the playground in 5 minutes. I have a great idea. This worried me because Carla's great ideas almost always mean big trouble for me. I dashed outside and jogged to the park. When I saw Carla, my heart sank because her gigantic dog Perro was with her. I liked everything about Carla except Perro. I've never had a pet, so I feel uncomfortable and nervous around animals. I'm embarrassed to say that I'm afraid of Carla's dog. Carla smiled. Isn't this the perfect location for a pet show? She asked. All the kids in the neighborhood can show off their pets' talents and demonstrate the things they do well. There are plenty of comfortable benches for our parents and friends to sit on, and since you don't have a pet to enter into the show, you will be the announcer. Okay, let's pause and think about our realistic fiction features, made up characters. We have Carla Hernandez, Daniel, who's telling the story, and Carla's dog, Perro. Those characters are made up in these made up illustrations. We also have a made up event that could really happen. Carla wants to have a pet show to show off what the animals can do. Daniel is scared of her dog. That could all really happen. And then we have dialogue. Dialogue is where the characters are talking. If we go back to this first paragraph, here are quotation marks that start where Carla's talking and end where Carla stopped talking. That dialogue with the quotation marks shows exactly what the characters are saying. And then we have this illustration, again, that shows the made up events between the characters. Those are our features of a realistic fiction. Let's read on to find out what happens to Daniel since he's so nervous to participate in this pet show. I'm sorry, I apologized, but that's impossible. Crowds make me nervous and unsure. Besides, I don't like animals, remember? That's nonsense, said Carla. There's nothing to be concerned about because you'll be great. Just then, Perro leaped up, slobbered all over me, and almost knocked me down. Yuck! Down, Pero, stay! I shouted. Pero sat as still as a statue. Wow, you're good at that, said Carla. Now let's get started because we have a lot to do. By Saturday morning, I had practiced announcing each pet's act 100 times. My stomach was doing flip-flops by the time the audience arrived. The size of the crowd made me feel even more anxious. When the show began, I gulped and announced the first pet. It was a parakeet named Butter, whose talent was walking back and forth on a wire. When Butter finished, everyone clapped and cheered. So far, everything was perfect, and I was beginning to feel calmer and more relaxed. I realized that being an announcer wasn't so bad after all. All right, so I'm going to pause there and I'm going to remind myself, what are the features of a realistic fiction? Right, we have made-up characters. Carla, Daniel, her dog, and now we have a parakeet named Butter that was in the pet show. We have made-up events. Carla and Daniel are hosting a pet show with animals, made-up animals. Could these characters really exist? They could. Could this event really happen? It could, but it's all made up. That's what makes it a realistic fiction. It could happen. Also, there's dialogue that shows exactly what the characters are saying with these quotation marks that start the sentence and end the sentence. And then we have this illustration that shows the pet show taking place, which is actually a made-up event that didn't really happen. Those are realistic fiction text features. Now, we want to know, let's go back to our essential question. How can you use what you know to help others? We want to find that out. Then it was Carla and Pero's turn. Sit, Pero, she said. But Pero didn't sit. Pero was not paying attention to Carla. He was too interested in watching Jack's bunnies jump in and out of their boxes. Suddenly, Pero leaped at the bunnies, who hopped toward Mandy and knocked over her hamster's cage. Pudgy, the hamster, escaped and began running around in circles while Kyle's dog, Jake, howled. This was a disaster, and I had to do something. Sit, I shouted at Pero. Quiet, I ordered Jake. Stay, I yelled. Everyone, kids and pets, stopped and stared at me. Even the audience froze. Daniel, that was incredible, said Carla. You got the pets to settle down. That's quite an achievement. Sadly, that was the end of our pet show, but now I have more confidence when I have to speak in front of people. And even though I am still nervous around animals, Pero and I have become great friends. And I have discovered my talent too. So Daniel obviously has a talent for giving orders. He used what he knew to help the pet show. And now we're going to close our reading and think about those features of a realistic fiction. We have the made-up characters. We have made-up events. We have dialogue that shows the characters are talking. And we have the illustrations that show these made-up events. Let's now go and answer our questions about the text. These questions will ask us about our realistic fiction. Number 1, how can you tell that this text is realistic fiction? Now remember, as third graders, we always restate the question and then answer using what we know. So we're going to restate by crossing out our question words. And now we're going to use the words in our question. You can either start our restatement by saying, you can tell that this text is realistic fiction, or you can just say, this text is a realistic fiction because it has made-up characters, dialogue, and illustrations that show the made-up events. What is the name of the literary elements that tells characters exact words? Well, that's one of our features of a realistic fiction, dialogue. So again, we're going to restate our question and then answer it. In blue is our restatement. The name of the literary element that tells characters exact words is dialogue. And then our last question, number 3, how does the illustration help show that the text is realistic fiction? Again, we're going to restate our question. That will be in blue, and then our answer will be in black. The illustration helps show that the text is realistic fiction because it shows made-up characters and the made-up event where Peardo leaped at the bunnies at the pet show. We just met our purpose as readers. I can identify features of a realistic fiction. We identified the made-up characters, the made-up story that could really happen, and we also identified the dialogue and illustrations. The dialogue shows our made-up characters talking, and the illustrations show our made-up events. All right, third grade. Keep reading with that purpose. I can identify features of a realistic fiction. Have a great Monday.